Hello everyone, and welcome to another Thursday. That's right, it's Thursday, it's time for a Gear Talk. Thursday's Gear Talk time, always at 5 o'clock Central Time for anyone who's on East or West Coast. I'm in the middle, so that's the time I go off of. So, welcome everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about Reyna Torres, or Reyna Diaz as she's later known as, or Queen Reyna as she's currently known as. We're not going to talk about that today, though. We're going to be talking about Reyna when she was alive, Reyna when she was a part of GABE'S Convoy, and throughout Gears of War 4. Now, the reason we're not going to talk about her as the Queen is because, and this is going to be a spoiler territory thing for anyone who has not played 5 yet, or the end of 4, technically. That was a while ago, though. For anyone who does not know, at the end of Gears of War 4, Reyna does die. She passes away. She has fully just bit the bullet. She is done. Now, as of Gears of War 5, they do bring her back. She is the only character, I believe, in the entire story to come back from the dead. But we do learn, at least through supplemental, well, even supplemental material, it's at least speculated currently, and by what we're seeing, is that Myrrah, through the hive mind, has now taken control of Reyna's body, and that's mostly Myrrah that's controlling everything. So we're not really going to look at Queen Reyna, because Queen Reyna is kind of, not only is it more Myrrah, but it's kind of a character all of their own at this point. So we're just going to be talking about Reyna when she was alive. She won the poll, so she gets her time in the spotlight. So let's talk about Reyna and also some odd things that go along with her and her family tree. We're going to start off first by talking about a few things involving Reyna, because there are a few things to get into before we get into current stuff that we know about her, stuff that we've learned. And the stuff we need to talk about is where she comes from, and also her blood relative being her mother, Myrrah, who became the Queen of the Locust. Now, the thing we need to talk about is, well, she was born from Myrrah. That all happened. It was a natural birth. Everything happened. It's the process of what she also inherited from her mother, from Myrrah, we have to talk about quick, because there's a lot of things that don't really add up age-wise that are kind of explained through her blood relation through Myrrah. Now, you need to remember, when Myrrah was first discovered and brought in, Myrrah was found to be immune to emulsion. She aged very slowly compared to other humans, and not only that, but she had a hive mind connection later on when the Locust became a thing. So, from Myrrah, Reyna inherited the majority of all of that. We know for a fact she was inherited the hive mind. It's alluded to in 4, but it's also pretty much confirmed towards the end. We know that she got slow aging by what we're going to talk about in a moment, which needs to be addressed, and being immune to emulsion, I should say. That we don't really know too much about, because when she was around as an adult, when we see her, emulsion's not really around anymore. We can assume she is, because Gabe, later on her husband, did suffer from rust lung and die from it. She never did. And she was around Gabe a lot of the time that he was around during the Locust War. They were together. There was only roughly a year they weren't together, and that was before he went and started GABE'S Convoy. So let's kind of just talk about like what is going on with her genetics, because here's the thing. The age thing is going to play a role, and by how it's talked about on the wiki, and I'm not really wanting to trust the wiki too much because there are a lot of assumptions on it for this and a lot of people filling in gaps that have not been filled yet. But I am going to take a grain of salt with this one and talk about it. The general consensus that's been found, not only there but forums, Reddit, I have found, is the slow aging is roughly around 50% slower than a normal human's age. So for instance, right now I'm 28. So if I were to be 50% of my aging is slowed, yes, I've been alive for 28 years, but I would have the body and probably the mentality of a 14-year-old. That's what I would be sitting at right now. So it's important to say that because it gets a little convoluted trying to get the timeline. And it's going to be a bit of a tangent, but you'll understand because this does play into Reyna. And also the age that she was when she died. That's not talked about really. Her age is not brought up a lot because it's a lot higher than you think it's going to be. So starting off, we have to talk about Myrrah. And I do actually have everything written down. I don't have it in front of me, but I did do the math and I broke everything down the best that I could. So here we go. So what I have here in front of me is kind of a general census of the timeline from when Myrrah was first brought into New Hope when they started that to where we were when Reyna died. So we kind of have a general idea of that. I also did throw in Kate's age because that'll also come up in a moment. So starting off by the 50% aging. We're going to go off of that just for the sake of it. A lot of these are guesstimated numbers aside from the specific dates in each era we're going to talk about. The ages are very generalized. It could be give or take, but this is roughly around where everyone was either at the time of things, when they died, or where they currently are. So, starting off, an age I roughly found was Myrrah was taken in at the age of around 8. So the reason I bring that up is because if you look at the timeline of when New Hope was started, when the Pendulum Wars was going on, 8 sounds like a good number. You see her photo and you see that she looked relatively younger, around 4. But again, slow aging. It could be older than that. So I'm going to say around 8, so around the body and mind of a 4-year-old. Now, another 15 years you can tackle onto that, she was at New Hope. The reason I go with 15 is because we also introduced Ukon. Ukon was also already there before Myrrah arrived. And it's safe to say that he was growing up with when he became a sire. So it's roughly okay to understand that he was still around a childish age to a teenage age. So around 15, for him it makes sense. Accelerating healing doesn't really affect him. He's only good at rapid regeneration. So roughly 15, around that time they moved to Kadar. So we have 15 years tacked on, we're at Kadar, and roughly she is there for 10 years at Kadar. From there, she would be around 33 years old, and on the wiki they give exact timelines for when the early, mid, and late Pendulum Wars were. She would have been around 33 for the late portion. Reyna would have been born roughly 2 years before the beginning of the late portion. So, Myrrah would have been 33 when there were 26 years left of the Pendulum Wars. When Reyna was born, let's say she was around 31 for an idea. It's stated that for her, when she was adolescent, that's when they were experimenting with the stem cells with her, and for, creating everything. The matriarch was already around, the locusts were made, so we have that. Now, let's say roughly from there, from the 33 when she left to 31 when Reyna was born, that would roughly put her around the age of 15 I came across. And for the age of adolescence for childbearing, normally that would be 10, well not childbearing, but adolescence is 10 to 19. Normally for a female, an average female, the period would start around 12. I assume they probably were experimenting and getting the locust going. 3 years later, that is when her and Torres decided to get together and have a child. Now remember, Torres is a bit older, and technically Myrrah is 33, but she has the body of a 15-year-old, so take that as you will. So all of this goes through, she gives birth, and roughly I have it, let's say around 2 years after the birth, they're experimenting on Reyna and doing things. That's when Torres grows a conscience, go figure, in a place like this, and decides to take Reyna out of there. At this point, let's say roughly that was a year or a year and a half into it. Let's say that's even like just a little while into it, and that's when Myrrah snaps, breaks free, causes the rebellion, and out goes everyone to Nexus when they form it. So from there you have Reyna, who is now an infant, roughly let's say around 1 or 2. She is currently now going to be living through a little bit left of the late Pendulum Wars, because it is stated they survived through that. Well, they'll survive all the late. They're still in the late section. So 26 years onto there. Then they survive the Locust War. We'll get into a lot of that because she comes up and becomes a prominent role, and she lives through the era of peace, which is roughly 25 years. Now, having said that, we're going to talk about when everyone, the age that they last left off in their lives, or they currently are, because this is where Kate also comes up, and we need to talk about Reyna's age in tactics. Okay, 17 AE is when Myrrah was killed by Marcus and died. She would have been roughly around 83 years old for this. So 83 puts her around the age of 41 and a half, around that for what her physical body was. So that is when Myrrah died. Now, remember, mid-Pendulum Wars, late, Locust, era of peace, Reyna would have some age on her at this point. Reyna, the character that we've come across, during Tactics, when she first meets Gabe in 1 AE, is roughly, by the time she's been alive, 30 years old, with the body of roughly around a 15-year-old. Now, for where she is at the end of everything, when she passes this mortal coil, she is roughly around 71 years old. She has been alive for 71 years, but physically she has the body of around 35 and a half years she's been around. So 35 and a half physically. As for birthing, when it came to Kate and everything, she would have been in her 50s for that. Remember, with the physical body of a 15-year-old and everything, Gabe, I mean, she would have been 30. And it wasn't right after everything. That was like the Locust War happened and then they got together, or a little bit in between. So it wasn't like she was still physically a 15-year-old. And I'm sure people noticed she aged slower after a while. So yeah, they got together, and it was quite a while later when Kate came. Kate was born. This was stated, she was born roughly 20 AE, so 3 years after the Locust War ended. And Kate currently right now is 22. This is where we currently left off in the story. She's 22 years old. Now, it's important to state that just because you get genetics from a parent doesn't mean it will always keep going. For instance, Kate, if this was true with the 50% mark that we're kind of going with, she would be 11 right now. She's not 11. So I needed to break that down just so you can understand. Again, this was very long. We're going to get into Reyna. Reyna has quite a bit of story to her, so this video is already going to be long. But it's important to tackle. She's roughly around 71 years old at the age of her death. She has been around a while. We don't get a lot of history for the Pendulum Wars, and aside from tactics, we get a little bit involving the Locust, and then we have a lot more supplemental material for the in-between time of peace and throughout Gears of War 4. So, let's tackle onto her history now. Like I just stated too at the very beginning of that long tangent, she was originally born in the labs to Myrrah over at Mount Kadar. She was born, and from there she was taken by Torres, because Torres at one point grew a conscience. Oh my goodness, we're doing horrible things, that's fine, but on my daughter, well, we can't be having that. So he picked up Reyna, left, and they pretty much stated to Myrrah that her daughter died and Torres is just gone. So they leave. Myrrah has a freak out and just kills everybody. We'll get a lot more into that when we get into Myrrah's video someday. And he leaves with little Reyna. So he leaves, essentially at this point, even during the Pendulum Wars, he becomes like a drifter, a stranded before stranded existed, and a survivalist. Again, this man is a scientist. It's not like he has a prehistory of all of this. So he leaves with Reyna, and throughout the rest of the Pendulum Wars, they're pretty much just living outside of the public, just like jumping from town to town probably. They're just surviving. Again, during this time, like, civilization is still a thing. So I'm guessing they probably lived outside, like somewhere that was like an abandoned building or something, just away from people, and were just living their life. Torres instilled into Reyna a lot of things. He did teach her survival the best he could, but he also did teach her, like, the Cog are evil and horrible. I have a feeling he didn't just say, he never did tell him, like, here's what's up with your mom and everything, but he probably did say, like, probably lied, said her mother died or something happened to her, and said, like, here's what you need to know. The Cog are horrible. They did horrible things. Don't trust them. Don't trust strangers. They're bad. Don't take random candy from people. And anyone who holds power, screw them. We're not dealing with that. That's basically what he raised her with. And remember, with her slower aging, she had, like, double the time she was around Torres. It was, like I said, roughly around, like, 30 years she was around him. And obviously he was aging and everything. He probably wasn't a spry young man towards the end of it all. But she was raised up with those beliefs, and she really wasn't a big fan of her father either. She understood he wasn't the greatest person in the world. She started to understand this is a bad person. Like, she's my dad. By what he's saying, it must be true. I trust my dad, but at the same time, I know that he's not the greatest person in the world. I know there's things he's not telling me. I know that for a fact. So Reyna and him decided to hunker down, and they started going around. The Pendulum Wars finally end, and at this point, 6 weeks go by of just, hey, everything looks fine. The Locust hit, and things go poopy. It's important to state that Torres and Reyna do not know that Myrrah has killed everyone and has escaped to Kadar, started Nexus, and now has caused an army to come up. Torres did not know that. He left and he never learned anything else. He probably knew what the Locusts were. He probably knew, like, there's an army of them. He probably did not know that Reyna was in charge. Reyna was the queen. He probably had no clue. He probably saw them and said, oh no, this is what we were working on. This is bad. What Niles said has come true. We need to run. Okay, I got it right here. It's the Zenic lab. So they go and hunker down there, and that's pretty much where they're staying, just living. He's a scientist, so he probably knows the place well. Just so happens that Ukon finds them. I'm very certain Torres knows who Ukon is. Again, they spent all this time experimenting. So Ukon knows who Reyna is. He very much is aware of Reyna. He's aware of it all. So he doesn't say anything, but he locks up Reyna. Pretty much as, like, the only friends I had living and growing up were, like, Srock wasn't the smartest dude in the world, and your mom. He didn't say that to her, but essentially that's what he's thinking. And I'm going to give you a courtesy that the humans really wouldn't have given us. I'm going to let you live. What I'm going to do is put you in the corner. You're going to have a little timeout. And your dad here, I need to have some words with him. So, come here. Proceed to kill her dad. And she is not the happiest about this. Again, it is her father. She's not a fan, but it's her dad. Her dad just got killed, and Reyna does escape and get out of there. At this point, she does leave for the Xenic outpost. When she gets there, she comes across the Locust. There's a hive mind connection, but I have a feeling not all of them are... Myrrah's not hitting a mic and just like... Attention, everybody. I have a feeling like she can pick and choose, or she talks to some at a time. So she goes and does, talks to them now and then. That's probably how Ukon knew who it was and location. But not all of them. She comes across some others, and they catch her and put her in a torture pod to go and get her processed. I have a feeling that whoever did that would be getting a deduction in their pay from Myrrah herself on that one. So she's pretty much being sent to dead to rights. And this is when Gabe comes across her and frees her from the torture pod. I was going to say trap. Frees her from it. And this is when he's like, hey... we're freeing everyone. You can come with us back to the camp. If you can fight with us. We're going to return. And they do that. So, they return to the camp. And once they return, this is when they learn that she knows something. Or like, there's something going on here. Michaela takes a crack at talking to her. Doesn't work. She says she doesn't want to talk to me. You can try. Gabe goes and talks to her. And remember, she is ingrained with the idea that the COG and authority, big no-nos. So Michaela... leader of the Stranded, she doesn't want to deal with that authority. Gabe, leader of this convoy and also a COG, doubly doesn't want to deal with him, but she sees something in him she likes. She sees that he's a kind soul, he's a nice fella, and she proceeds to talk to him. And she states like, Ukon killed my dad, I know where Ukon is. If you're going to go kill him, I want to come with and fight him too. That is my only agreement to this, I want to kill him. So they pretty much agree, and they bring Reyna with. And they do go to the labs. And again, this is at the very end of Tactics. This is like the last few chapters. We get introduced to her in the final act, and all of this is like just barely any chapters we get at the end. So they go there, and of course, they come across Ukon. They break their way in. They're fighting in. They take down everybody else. Ukon gets on his Hydra, riding it like it's a gosh darn bull at the rodeo, and they proceed to take it down. Ukon falls, and this is when everyone's around him ready to deliver the killing blow, and the person who gets the W on this one is Reyna. She goes up, blows him in the head, and essentially says, screw you, my win, and takes her necklace back. I should also mention, the necklace, the one that Kate has, originally comes from Reyna. Now, I didn't mention it earlier because we were kind of going through the tangent. I just got out of that. When Torres left the labs, he took one thing of Myrrah's with to remember her by, because he did care for her. There was a romantic interest there. It wasn't just a science experiment. He did, in a sense, love the mother of his child. So they left, and he took along the necklace that Kate always had and Reyna had. It was a symbol of the locust on the back, and it was pretty much like the decorative design that they saw as belonging to their grandmother. So they took it, Torres took it, gave it to Reyna when she was old enough, saying, this was from your mother, this is all that's left of your mother, and she kept that. When Ukon captured her and put her in timeout, he took that back. He said, you know what, I'm taking this as a prize, probably also to show Myrrah, like, take a look, she's alive. Probably that. So he took it. When she killed him, she took the necklace back, and as we know, the necklace was given to Kate later on, and that's how Kate currently had it. So she gets it off, she takes it, and they leave. They have now killed Ukon, and that's when they talk and decide, like, hey, there's still more to kill out there. The adventure isn't over, obviously. It's time that we continue fighting, and they do this. And they go through the entire Locust War. Basically, they've become stranded. They are stranded. Because Gabe has pretty much denounced the COG. Sid has pretty much also done that. Michaela was already stranded. And Reyna's kind of just like, well, you guys are the closest thing I have to a family now. I've been alive on this planet 30 years and no one's really been nice to me. So yeah, I'm up with you. Gabe, you seem like a really charming fella. Let's go. So they go and they're fighting their entire way throughout the Locust War. And this is when Reyna and we also have Gabe have their romantic feelings come front and they decide to get married. After the marriage happens, there's a few other things that come up. Obviously, the family has to meet one another. That's a thing. We've basically already met the family of Reyna. We just don't know. Reyna has no clue of it at the time, but we've met the Locust. That's extended family left and right. Obviously, Mom's not coming to the banquet. So on Gabe's side, his folks, as far as we know, are never mentioned, but he does have a brother, and that is Oscar. Oscar is brought up throughout the situation for what are we going to do about him. He is Cog. We are not. So towards the end of the Locust War, they do get in contact, or at least even after the Locust War, they do talk with Oscar. He does make contact, Gabe does, Reyna is also there. And Oscar is, what's the best word? He's not a bad person, but he, at the time, he's fully dedicated to the Cog. He is. He's always kind of been an alcoholic, so that also plays into things, and he's seen as very irresponsible. He's not like the tried and true gear you normally have. So for Gabe, he doesn't see this as something he wants to associate with. Reyna obviously doesn't, because he sees Gabe as a good person, your brother isn't. So Gabe is kind of like, we can't associate with you if this is how it's going to be. Like, I left the Cog because of what they did to me and how they're treating everything. You can stay, but I don't want to see you again. Like, it sounds like bad blood, but understand, Gabe almost got hit by a hammer of dawn just because he was trying to do the right thing. Like, he's doing covert missions he doesn't even want to do. All right? There's a lot of history he learns about what the Cog did. He doesn't want that anymore. And at the time, Oscar is very dedicated. And Reyna, I should bring up Reyna. This is her video. Reyna's just 100% like, whatever you say I'm fine with, I just don't like him in general. That's how it goes. So they decide they're not going to be dealing with Oscar anymore. So they move on their merry way and continue life. And this is when the Locust War finally ends. Now, when it ends, it's pretty much seen as, well, time to start anew. And instead of deciding to conform and rejoin with the rest of civilization, doesn't sound the best, but with the majority of civilization still alive, Gabe and Reyna decide that they're not going to do that. They are going to live their life with the convoy that they created, which has gotten bigger by this point, I believe. They decide they're going to start up their own fort. They're going to start up their own civilization, their own village, and this is where we have Umsun come up. I'm not good at pronunciation, but it's the fort where we have in Gears of War 4. This is where they call home. This is their base of operations. They take this old mining area and decide we're going to plant our own village here. We're going to start our own settlement, and it's going to be something that's good. It's not going to be totalitarian. It's not going to be anything that's dictatorship. It's a very tried and true, like, basically a democracy. But everyone pretty much saw Gabe as being the leader because he's pretty much led everything this entire time. Let's keep him as leader. Reyna is the second in command. She's also his wife, so it's not like she doesn't have a say in things. You know, they're pretty much co-rulers, or co-leaders, I should say. But everyone does see Gabe as being like the one in charge. So from here, they finally decide to start building their family, having a family, because everything's chilled out now, and they're like, well, it's just the two of us and all of our friends. Let's actually explore children. So they do that. So Reyna does end up becoming pregnant. This is roughly 3 years after the war is over, 20 AE exactly. She gets pregnant and gives birth to Kate. Now, Kate is born, beautiful, healthy baby girl. Everything is fine. Everyone is happy. So I should also reference something and preference something while we go into this. So Kate does have, by a parental side of things, a normal upbringing. But it is important to remember that the original upbringing that Reyna had was a little different than most. She was very, like, kept away from the public. She was taught to distrust a lot of people. She was very dubious and very short-tempered with things because that's how she was raised. She was raised by a person she didn't care for too much. So Reyna was taught survival by someone who wasn't the greatest, but taught survival over 30 years. Then you have meeting Gabe. Gabe taught her how to correctly, properly fight with a weapon, with a gun, how to properly do this. So she has a lot of experience in this at this point, and they pretty much, I can't think of a better term, they pretty much teach Kate everything they know about, like, survival, fighting, all of this. Because Reyna is very talented and skilled, and even after the war is over, she goes back to her survival roots, except this time instead of, like, an urban setting, it's more in the forest, foraging, buying and selling with other settlements, stuff like that. So life goes on fine. You do realize that again, Reyna's very well trained in a lot of things, especially in the art of machetes and knives, we learned. So, Reyna is very well in this by the fact that at one point they're driving off to make a trade with another village, and they get ambushed. I believe they're called pickers, but it's pretty much like people that are coming to take their stuff. Reyna takes a machete, pretty much chucks it, kills one of them, kills someone with the other, and she's just going to town with her hands and machetes. We learn later on in 4-2, she is trained in using weapons, obviously by Gabe, obviously by survival, but she prizes hand-to-hand more. She's very well trained with that. We see that with the Jinbot. We see when she's fighting the Speaker, she uses knives more. She prefers hand-to-hand combat, mostly with foreign objects in hands, like knives and machetes. So we see she's very talented. Again, she is very short-tempered. Later on, we have it where everyone's going camping, everyone's having a good time. Gabe and Reyna, they both lose Kate. They can't find Kate, they don't know what's going on, and Reyna and Gabe do find her later on, and she is chilling with pretty much a hermit. And Reyna's very short-tempered. She's ready to kill this man, because her daughter's been missing for 3 days, and she learns she's been with him. She is ready to just murder. Gabe obviously stops her, like, hey, chill out, it's okay, she's fine, everyone's safe. And she is compassionate and understanding, though when she cools off, she understands, like, hey, you did save my daughter. You are welcome in our village anytime you want. The man refuses, but later on they meet him again. He does come, and they teach him in the ways of leading a village, all of this other stuff. Reyna and Gabe both teach him, and he goes along his merry way. Now, from here, things kind of take a darker turn. I should also premise at this point that we don't know where Sid and Michaela are during this. We don't know if they're there or if something happened. But at this moment, we know that, essentially, I don't know the better way to put it, rust lung is diagnosed to Gabe. Gabe has said that you have rust lung, you don't have a lot of time left. Now, with how rust lung works, it can stay dormant in you for a while, like we talked about in the rust lung video, so there is a chance that Gabe already had it for a long time and it just went dormant, and it just reemerged as he grew older. Remember, time is going still, like, it's still further and further into time. It's been from when Reyna met Gabe, it's been 16 years, okay? We have that. Tack 3 years on more before Kate is born. This is the 25 years of peace, and this is where Kate is still like a child, but she's entering teenage years, so jump like another 10 years from that. That's roughly, we're looking at a good amount of time here. We're looking at, there's 13 plus 16. You've got 29 years added right there. Think about it. Let's say Gabe was like mid-20s. He's at 40s, pushing 50s at this point. He just got diagnosed as rust lung. It's finally flared up and taken hold. He ain't got a lot of time left. Rust lung works is pretty fast when it wants to be, and it's decided to be. So she's with him, and she says, I'm always here for you. Is there anything I can do for you? And he requests, I want you to go and find Oscar. I want my brother here on my deathbed. I would like to see my brother before I die. And Reyna is not a big fan of this. Again, she does not like Oscar. She's not a fan of him. But to honor her husband, she decides, I'll go find him. So she treks out. It takes her a while, but she does find Oscar and tells him, Gabe is going to die soon. If you remember me, I'm his wife pretty much. He doesn't have a lot of time. I want you to come back and see him before he passes. And she returns before he does. And Oscar is trying to make his way back, but before Oscar can make it, Gabe does die before he sees Oscar. Now, Oscar gets to the camp. He gets to the fort. And this is where Reyna essentially is now put in charge. Like, she's second in command. The leader is dead. Reyna, congratulations, you're in charge now. And she has to decide what to do with Oscar, because she's sitting there, she does not like Oscar, she does not care for Oscar, but she's like, here's what. If it were up to me, I want you to leave and never come back. And obviously I'm paraphrasing this. I want you to leave, but it was Gabe's last wish to see you. Gabe did care about you. I cared about Gabe. If you want to stay, if you want to be a part of this village, by the grace of Gabe, you know what? You can stay. But I expect you to put your work in. I expect you to pass the trial of getting in, stuff like that. Get initiated into the village. If you want to stay, you got to earn it. And if you don't want to keep it, you don't want to stay here, get out. I'll kick you out personally. And Oscar sits down, thinks about it, and he's a team player. He puts on his big boy shoes, he puts in the work, he puts in all the time and effort, and he still is an alcoholic throughout all this, sad to say, but, you know, Reyna does see this and she understands and she comes around to liking Oscar and thinking Oscar is a good man. After a while, it takes Oscar to earn her favor and her trust. So while they're doing everything at the outpost, Reyna is in charge. Even when Gabe's around, you need to remember on the other side of the fence, the coalition has started up again. Anya is now in charge. And it's not like Anya ever approached them to join in. I'm sure she must have once or twice. But Anya's doing her thing. She's leading the government. And Anya does die at one point. And this is where we have the new, not chairs, but the ministers stepping in. And this is when people start to leave and they start joining outposts and not settlements. Again, that's coming up in a moment, but join the forts and everything, the outsiders. And Gabe is slowly gaining more people in the village. He is slowly growing a larger force. Force isn't the right word. They were never hostile. They were very peaceful. Gabe was a very peaceful leader. Reyna became a bit more... She was a bit more... Bloodthirsty is not the right word, but she was a bit more vicious. She had a bit more of a bite to her. So that happens, and then the Settlement 2 situation happens where COG are firing on civilians. Now, Reyna, this is when Gabe had died and Reyna's in charge. Reyna had nothing to do with that period. Reyna never was involved, anything. So when that happens and more people are flooding in, Reyna is taking more people in with open arms. She's still not a fan of the COG, but she understands, hey, you guys are getting shot at, probably not the best thing. If you're willing to put in the work, come on in. At this time, leading into 4, a little bit before 4, but getting there, we have from the Settlement 2 situation, we have JD and Del make their way in. Del is pretty much just shell-shocked. He doesn't want to be a part of the COG anymore. And JD, little secret for you, he gave the order, and he's like, I'm just going to follow my best friend. That happens, and Reyna is like, no, you're COG, get out. No COG allowed. Get. Civilians, I understand why they're here. You leave. And then that's when Kate steps in. Kate is now older. She's around the age of, in her 20s now, close to 22, and says, no, I'm going to vouch for them. They seem like they're good. They're obviously, you know, understanding the COG sucks. Let's let them in. And Reyna obliges and like, okay, fine, but they still have to work. She never really truly does trust them because they are still ex-COG themselves. It probably took Oscar a long time to win her favor. And again, Oscar is her brother-in-law. It probably took a bit of work to get that bridge mended. These two COGs coming out of nowhere, probably not the best, and also Jin is getting pretty pissy about things at this moment. From there, we have the situation where everyone's living their life now. Reyna's in charge, and in the background, we hear things are going on. People are going missing. Situations where we have like not only outsiders, but like COG civilians are missing. Things are happening, and we don't know what's going on. First Minister Jin, on the other side of the fence, is assuming the outsiders are involved. Something's going on where they must be coming and stealing our citizens and adding them to their camp. They must be trying to overthrow us or something. They're coming and trying to take over our government. That's not happening. Even Reyna many times to Jin says, no, don't know what you're talking about. We want nothing to do with you. Why would we ever go and steal your people? We're only in it to steal your stuff. So I say that because, like I said, Gabe was a bit more peaceful and lived things pretty much farm style. Reyna is okay with stealing. Reyna decides if we have to, we're going to steal from them and raid their stuff. They will do that. Reyna does want to keep things a lot more mellow. When things are getting a lot more heated, she's like, step back, we're not going to do as much raiding. But she's not against raiding the COG. So I say that because when the Swarm are doing everything in the background, those whispers of things, again, Jin is blaming them. And at one point, we have JD, Del, Kate, and Oscar. They head off to go to Settlement 5 to grab a power source, a fabricator, so they are able to help power up the camp some more. This angers Jin immensely, and she decides, you know what? Send the DBs in, invade, burn it to the ground, I don't care, kill them all. And this is where we have Reyna and everyone fighting off the DBs, and they do it, they win. Before the fight begins, though, we do have that situation where Reyna is talking face to screen with Jin, to the point where she's just mad, takes out those 2 trusty knives or machetes, puts them around the neck, and just cuts the head off, kicks him down, and says, this is how we do things around here. Pretty badass, if I do say so myself. I loved it. So, from there, the battle's over, and she is just seething at Kate and JD and Del about, why did you go to 5? Why did you take it? I didn't want you guys to cause problems when there was so much heat already. Now we've got them up our ass. Thanks a lot for that. Look at everything that just happened. Again, being a leader. When everything finally simmers down, she says, just, we'll deal with it some other time. And when night falls, this is when the Swarm now appear. And this is when some things go kittywampus pretty quick. So it's important to state, just like the beginning of this long video from the long tirade, that originally, from the genes we got from Myrrah to Reyna, Reyna had a connection to the hive mind. I've made a video on it. I've talked about it. Was Reyna aware that the swarm were coming? I feel like she was. She probably had a good sense something was going to happen. I just don't feel like she was aware for how bad it was going to be. So the swarm do come. She does lock them away, kind of more evidence that something was going on. She went and locked them. Before we even saw the enemy attacking her, she understood what was going to happen. And she starts to come across the speaker. We don't know it's a speaker yet, but the speaker comes up ready to take her. And this is where Reyna goes one-on-one with a scion. Remember, the scions are like pretty uber. These guys are pretty strong for what they are by lore-wise. The scions come. The speaker 1v1s Reyna. Reyna puts up a fight. Give Reyna some chops. She's got her knife, or machete, whichever you want to call it. Cuts it is probably a good term for it at this point with its evolution. Cuts its hand off. The speaker's sire feels it, and he's like, you just cut it off. Thanks a lot for that one. And they continue to fight. He gets a lot of good hits on her, but she's trucking along. At one point, Oscar gets involved in the fight. He gets a knife through the shoulder. He's feeling that one. They continue to fight. Reyna just starts leaving some strikes, stabbing him right in the stomach. You know, he's sitting there like, yeah, that hurts. Thanks a lot for that. Finally, he does take her down. And the speaker does win. The speaker is still very strong for who he is. And at this point, this is where Reyna's been captured. She's been sent out, and she's getting hooked up to the hive mind itself so that pretty much the locust, well, the swarm at this point are now uber charged. Like, they're very mentally aware. They're understanding. They're not just throwing themselves into bullets. They're very, aware of what's going on. They're not just, we're the drones, we go bang bang. No, they're a bit more articulate in their minds now and thinking at a better pace. You plug the battery in. Like, that's what's going on right now. We have some power going. So, at this point, this is when Kate, JD, Del, they go off to Marcus. They have to figure out how to go and get Reyna, and that's when their adventure begins. That's a video for all of them because Reyna's not doing anything. She's hooked up and pretty much being a battery. The only time she does come up is when Marcus gets hooked up and taken by a snatcher and freed, and this is when he tells them, like, listen, everyone else is dead. The only one I see that is still alive when I was hooked up is currently Reyna. Reyna is still alive. She's hooked up somewhere. They're basically using her. That's what's going on. So after that, pretty much Kate just gets gung-ho at that point. But they go off. They finally get to Reyna after fighting through all of this stuff, going through the entire night. And you learn that Reyna is hooked up, but there's a problem. Everything is like tendrilled onto her and it's seeping into her body to the point where like everything is snapped into her. If you were to rip her out of this or cut her free, she will die. So it's at this point when she sees Kate and she tells Kate like, hey, listen, I love you. I'm very proud of you for what you are. Never be saddened by what's about to happen. I need you to kill me. She pretty much says like, look, I'm going to die no matter what. I would prefer you kill me so that they don't have a chance of being like making me their queen. And Kate obliges with this. And this is when Kate takes the knife and she does the deed and takes care of her mother. I don't think I need to go into detail. Her mother is no longer around. Her mother's still around by what we learn with the queen situation. But for Reyna herself, Reyna has passed along and she is no longer here with us now. And that's probably going to do it. Like, the only other thing I can tell you, like, in the books, we get flashbacks involving her. We get a bit more about when they were living after the war during the era of peace. This was the era of peace for the 25 years. There was an actual era of peace long ago in the story. But we have that. You learn that after she was killed, I don't know why this was a good idea. At the same spot she was killed, they put a rock in front and pretty much entombed her in the area. Didn't really stop the swarm from returning there and just moving the rock and taking her out. I mean, their call. I think there could have been a lot better options in that situation. But you do learn that she was pretty much given, like, a burial. The necklace was passed on to Kate. Kate has it now. And Reyna, for who we know, is now gone. Yes, the queen situation happened. She's brought back. You know, it's basically, it's not really, like, 100% confirmed, but it's basically Myrrah running the body. Like, Myrrah's in there, like, I'm here. This is me. So Yeah, when it comes to talking about the queen situation with Reyna, I think the best thing to do with that is wait until we have full confirmation to see what's going on with that. If it is Reyna herself that is in charge of the body, it's Reyna and she's just been like corrupted, I will make a Queen Reyna video. If it turns out that it's Myrrah pulling the strings, I feel that's something I will bring up in the Myrrah video itself. I feel that's the best choice because Reyna as a character for who we know as a human, it pretty much ends here. Fun fact about her too, like I think I said earlier, it's been a long video. She is the only character in Gears of War, I believe, that has actually canonically died and by some way come back to life. Because currently her body is alive, so Reyna has died and come back. Take with that what you will. She holds a record I don't think any other character can try and beat for leaving and coming back from this mortal coil we call life. So, yeah. What else? She's very talented with weapons, knives. She's immune to emulsion. She lived to her 70s. That's about it. That's all I can say. Yeah. I know this really was a longer one, but that explanation kind of had to be put in the beginning so you understand, like, again, when we start the story to here, it has been a long time. Reyna is still around and looking relatively young for what she should be. Gabe isn't here anymore. You know, if it wasn't Rustlung, I'm sure age would have definitely hit him harder and you would have seen something happen. So, yeah, I think, again, the explanation in the beginning is a bit long, but I think it's very well needed. Could I have made my own video on it? Maybe, but then I would have had to refer you to another video. So here you go. You get 2 videos for 1. So I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. And thank the patrons for making this possible. I'll see you guys in the next Gear Talk or the next video, whichever one tickles your fancy. Love you all to death. Later!